All right, so this is a recording note to myself about a work thing that, on the first part is very simple. What happens is we have a VPN and we have a customer, who's on some network, right? So we have our appliances installed in the customer's environment. And what we can do is we can SSH into our the equipment that's in the customer site. And since that equipment is in the customer site, it's technically in their network. So what you can do is you can do this cool thing called SSH tunneling, which basically says since you can use the CDS as the customer's equipment as a bridge into their network. So in other words, it's your laptop connected to the equipment in their network, and then you can go from there to somewhere else. Basically, it's a jump box in between. It's a bridge host, but they call it a bastion host. I get it, kind of. It makes sense. So, for an example, this customer, what they do is they have one site in North Carolina, okay, and so in North Carolina, installed these servers, and we can SSH into them. So we can SSH into the servers in North Carolina, and then we can access anything in that customer's network that's reachable by that host. So for example, when we typically install a server, sometimes we install the switch, and sometimes we install the storage too. The switch you can telnet into, and the storage you can use a web page to get to it. So sometimes what you need to do is you can create this bridge, like using SSH tunnels, to basically feed the command. You're able to log into their stuff essentially using the server as a middleman. In this customer's particular situation, what that happens is they have a primary site in North Carolina and they have a disaster recovery site in Philadelphia. And the issue here is that the Philadelphia site also has storage accessible by a web page and a switch accessible by telnet. Now, the switch part isn't that bad, mainly because what you do is you SSH into the server in North Carolina, then you SSH into the server um, in Philadelphia, and then you can telnet from that server to the switch. That's not a problem. The problem is the storage. The storage requires a web page, so that's the one that's tricky. And using this technique I'll show you, it took me a little while to figure out. It's just a pain because very rarely do you have to do this because it's a double hop, essentially. It's called a double SSH tunnel. But what you can do is you can basically feed back the web page from the server in the Philly side straight through North Carolina into where you're connecting from. So I'm going to show you this link here. I'll include it, but it's this is the guide I used essentially, and here's the architecture that is very much like our case. So here's us. This is my laptop. This is me connecting to the customer's network, right? And when I'm connected to the customer's network, this host is the customer's North Carolina location. So I'm going to use that. And what it means is if I'm here, if I connect to this host, I have access to anything in VLAN 2. But my goal here is access to this web server in VLAN 3. And to do that, I jump from here to here, but I also create a bridge from here to here, and it basically passes all the way through. Reading this guide was like mega confusing because for a few reasons. Probably the biggest thing to understand if you look at the guide and you're reading it, because the very beginning is like almost all text. The hardest part is, or the hardest part, but it's also the most important part, is this part, the ingress and egress. And the trick that did it for me was understanding that ingress and egress Yeah, well, they explained it right. I think the easiest part, I understood it reading it, but I had to like draw it on paper a few times. I would say the easiest way to do it is by far and away with paper because the issue with their examples, their text examples, was that they used like kind of poor names. Instead of tunnel host, they call it bastion host. And these are, even though they're the same thing, it just was like not very indicative as to what was going on. The other thing is that they say port and host port when they say L for local tunnel. But I get the better syntax. I'll show it to you. I'll show you the full syntax, even though it's like way more typing. It makes more sense. Because basically there's an implicit localhost in front of this first port. So it basically should. I'll show you. I'll show you. And then it goes through the three types. So there's three types. Don't forget, it's local tunnel, remote tunnel, and then there's dynamic tunnel. Dynamic tunnel is by far the most useful, but I don't know that you can dynamic double tunnel. So I didn't really mess with that. I didn't think it was worth bothering. So I just didn't mess with it because I don't know. It's a super pain to configure. I mean, I'm sure it's doable. But this first example, I think is, yes, this first one, since I understood the text first, it made the picture 1,000 times easier. But basically, if you look at the picture, it's you're here, you're connected here, and then you want to go to this mail server, and it's all unencrypted, right? So that's why it's red here. And if you follow the syntax of what we're trying to do, you can use this. So it's you're here, and you see their client is called you, and you're going to connect to this trusted host on an untrusted network, and it's green here because it's secured, right? Because you're protected by the SSH protocol, and then you're going to go from the trusted host to the mail server on 143 and connect to it. Now it's red here because what they're trying to say is this traffic is unencrypted, but you're on a trusted network, so that's why they put. This is actually a really, really good picture because it describes something that's complicated. It's saying that from here, when you connect to the mail server, the entire thing is unencrypted. Like if you're trying to authenticate to a mail server, you're actually sending the username and password in clear text. So that's why you don't want to do that. And what they're trying to say is if you use the method, then you're connecting to this trusted host through secure. So you're shipping the password encrypted. And from this trusted host is going to ship the password unencrypted to the mail server. But it's on a trusted network, so supposedly it's okay. Realistically, that's just never going to be. But it's for illustration and like, oh yeah, didn't think about that purposes. So this is the command, and I'll just try to break it down real quick. So you is the client, and you're creating an SSH tunnel, a local tunnel, and there is an implicit localhost. So it should say SSH-L localhost : 2043. This is the ingress. This is where you're coming in from. So when you're coming into something, like usually the big example is through web pages. So typically you would use your web browser and you would say, localhost and then the port number. Like whatever the client program is going to go through this socket essentially. But anyway, so this is localhost 2143. And the second part, this part here, is the egress. This is the actual target. So you can see here the green circle. This is where you're coming in. You're coming in at 2143, but you're trying to jump out and hit the mail server on 143. And this trusted host right here, this is the box you're going through. So they call that the bastion host. Okay, so it sounds good. So this part's super easy. This makes a lot of sense. It's just one command. It makes a lot of sense. They give you like another example. Same thing here. Oh, this one's more popular because this one's like super relevant. So what they say here is like you're here, and then you want to go through this host called bastion host, and you want to connect to this web server. Really, what this is used for is to poke holes in firewalls. But here, what you're doing is you're creating two tunnels from the same host. So you're saying SSH L localhost 8080 connecting to um, your ingress is the 8080 right here, and your egress is targeting the web server on 80, and you're just doubling it again. You're just choosing a port, and you're saying that, oh, you want to connect again on 443. What this lets you do is it lets you say, open up your web browser and type in localhost 8080, and you'll immediately you'll jump in here, and you'll jump out here on port 80. Same thing for SSL, right? So you're jumping in on this ingress on 443, your localhost 443, and you're going to jump out at target 443. That's it's just basically trying to say you can create 2 tunnels in one shot. Yeah, okay, kind of useful. It is actually, but so that's kind of useful. But it's really for this. Honestly, you wouldn't really you wouldn't do that. I don't see a reason to do this. I would just scroll up and say use the dynamic tunnel, because the dynamic tunnel, the cool thing about dynamic tunnel is it does not require an egress. It only has an ingress, and what it does is it dynamically figures out what the egress is, which is really neat. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, if the customer's network, or I'll just show you, if there was, just pretend there's no VLAN 3. If the customer had a bunch of web servers in VLAN 2, if you created the dynamic tunnel, the SOCKS dynamic tunnel, you could actually hit all these web servers in one shot. So, you don't have to make multiple tunnels, which is kind of cool. It's just a dynamic, crazy tunnel. Oh, the other thing that you need to know is that the port binding, the ports that you're creating for the tunnel basically cannot be listening. It'll say, it makes sense, right? You can't say that you're going to create a tunnel that has on a port that already has something listening to it. So you just have to choose something that doesn't listen. So it has to obey like every other thing, which makes sense, right? You can't have 2 services bound to the same port. So anyway, so for the customer's example, I'll just show you. Oh yeah. So we're gonna go through this. So what you do is you do this in 2 parts, and definitely the biggest part is understanding the syntax. What it's saying is you create 1 tunnel, and then you don't use the -n switch. I have no idea what it does, by the way. It just says you're not going to pass commands. And then what you do is you just say and then after you create the second one. So here, I'll show you actually how it works. I'll explain it. So each part here, I'm saying SSH as root, port 26, because we listen on port 26, for the agent. This way I can pass my keys because I have a key loaded. And then I'm saying create a tunnel on the ingress, the ingress being my laptop 443. And then the egress, I'm actually going to make it be port 8080, but on the local host of the box I'm jumping to. So I'm basically saying my ingress is my laptop. That's the in. I'm jumping out and trying to hit port 8080 on the actual host 1, the Bastion host here. So I'll show you in the picture. So what I'm saying is the blue part, or actually it's just like right here. So the first tunnel is this one. Actually, I think this picture does show it right. The green one, I think the green one is correct. Yeah, I think it is. So the green one is the ingress, which is 443. And the egress is the 880 in the Bastion host. And so let me just do that. Yeah, I know. Alright, and then I'll set timeouts, and then I'll cat forlog command. This way I don't mess up the thing. Oh, it was this one, sorry. Okay. Oh, here, actually, let me just do this. Here. Okay. And so now I'm saying from doing that SSH, I'm going to SSH from, well, let's see. I should actually just do this the other way, but that's okay. So this part, it could be either in the front or the back, right? It's just that, so this is the, in the picture, this is the test server. But really what this is in my customer's environment, it's the server that we have in Philadelphia. So right now I'm SSH into the server in North Carolina, but now I'm going to create another SSH connection, and I'm going to create another tunnel. And this tunnel is going to be, the first part is the localhost. So that is going to be the orange one. And the target, the egress, is this one, which is the customer's web page, and you can see I have it targeting the SSL port, SSL port. Okay, and so I'll do that. In my case, I had to forward the key here, or I had the key loaded and forwarded, right, with the -A switch, and hopefully this works. Otherwise, it's like mega embarrassing, but it's okay. I'll do this 127.0.1 HTTPS. Hopefully this works. Otherwise, I just super did that wrong. Mega embarrassing. Okay, so you can see here I targeted localhost. For some reason, you cannot use the word localhost. You actually have to use the address. But there we go. And you can see I'm in Philadelphia, but I passed through North Carolina, but I'm sitting in Florida doing this. I'm connected to the customer's network in North Carolina, but I'm pulling web pages from their server that's not it's not accessible any other way. I'm passing it through 2 SSH tunnels to get here. It is a very we need to be able to do this. It's just a huge pain in the what. Anyway, so I would definitely read this, understand it, and practice it, because it could save you infinite trouble. Because for some things you just don't have access to it. Like if you want to access any kind of web page or something, you can't do it any other way. Anything command line, no problem. You don't even need to do this for command line, right? You just jump into a box, jump into the other box, and then jump into whatever. But anyway, this is my own note for myself. This way I don't have to teach myself this again. But the big trick definitely to building the double tunnels or triple tunnels even. See, that's the thing. You could just like memorize, like, oh yeah, just look at the command line and just do the double, just copy and paste the double tunnel like I just did. But the trick is being able to build the double tunnel from scratch. I would definitely think the first few times, if I had to do this again, like from dead nothing, like if I just didn't do it for a while, or I had to go through like 3 boxes, like you can just keep going, right? It's definitely draw the picture and draw the jumps that you want to make, and just understand, just build on examples. But definitely ingress and regress matter for sure, because otherwise these commands don't make sense. And like I said, the other thing in my syntax is that you can see I added the implicit localhost. It's just because it makes it simple, right? So it should just be like, when you're saying -L, it's ingress, which is basically, you say host and then port, host : port, and then it's : egress. I don't know why it's called that, but I'm not like a bitch. And host and then port. and then it's also the host, the tunnel host. And the tunnel host, of course, can be before or after. Basically, that's the other part that was confusing. Tunnel host is not just the host that you're tunneling. It's actually the target that you're going to. So, you know, when you type in SSH-L, like the username and the password, you know, the username and the IP address is the tunnel host. It's not just your destination. It is the destination where your SSH is going, but it is also the tunnel host. So maybe that's a little confusing because it's basically two words for the same box, which is why it's confusing. But anyway, hope I don't have to look at this video ever for the record because it's a pain in the fucking ass. All right, thanks.